Okay, so I'd like to welcome everyone to the Meet the Candidates 2020 event. My name is Megan Vosk, and I am the middle school faculty rep, and I teach grade 7 social studies. This year, we have 6 candidates running for 4 board seats, and if elected, they will serve 2-year terms. In ABC order, the candidates are, and candidates feel free to wave when I call your name, Jitu Balakrishnan, Ritu Sri Datta, Sarah Cook, Priya Maheshwari, Courtney Morris, Swati Vasudevan. So welcome to all the candidates and welcome to everyone in the audience. I'd like to go over some Zoom etiquette before we begin. Please mute yourself unless you are talking to reduce background noise. If you need to leave before the event is over, please exit quietly. And when we get to the question and answer portion of the event, please type your questions into the question and answer area as the chat feature will be disabled. And please identify yourself and give your name and tell us if you're a teacher or a parent. Okay, so now I'll overview tonight's event. Each candidate will give an opening remark and answer 3 additional planned questions. The event will then be open to questions from the audience. The response time allotted for opening remarks is 2 minutes. The response time allotted for the 3 planned questions is 1.5 minutes. And the response time allotted for the Q&A questions is 1 minute. The planned program will last approximately 1 hour, and the Q&A portion may take up to 30 minutes. I will wave an orange card when 15 seconds are left in the response time and use a buzzer to let the speaker know when the response time has elapsed. Following this event, elections will be conducted online until noon Indian Standard Time on Thursday, May 21st. Please check your email for voting instructions and your personalized voting link after this event is finished. Thank you for being a part of this event and for taking part in this year's election. Your vote and voice matter. Now let's get started. We'll begin with opening remarks. The question to the candidates is, please introduce yourself and state why you are running for the AES board, including what you view as the top 3 strategic priorities the board should address in the next 2 years and why. And we'll go to G2 first.
Hi all, my name is Jitu Balakrishnan. I've been an AES parent for 10 years now. My daughter Ananya is in 10th grade, so it's been a while. I've been serving on the board for the last 2 years, just coming up at the end of the term. So I'm actually running for re-election to the board. The reason we did this is that even before the current crisis of COVID, one of the big areas of risks that we had identified for the school was in the governance at the board level, where as a board, we have one of the lowest tenures of board members among any school due to a number of factors. So the board continuity is actually one of the things that we had identified that we needed to pay a lot of attention to. So it was that was the reason. And with the current crisis, I think that it's become a little bit more acute. Moving on to the strategic priorities for the school, what we had identified as the strategic needs for the school that we were working on is that we saw the school coming out of a period where it had gone through a troubled few years and having a lot of compliance issues into something where we wanted to actually put it in a positive path. And so we picked on learning, institutional strength, and addressing risk as the 3 areas that we wanted to focus on. And those are broadly the areas in which we have done a lot of the work in the last 2 years. And I don't see that changing for the next few years. Things do change. Things do adapt to that. In learning, I think we'll have to focus a lot on the model of learning that we'll have. We've seen a taste of that, but we need to get that absolutely nailed in case the lockdown or distance learning lasts for a little longer than we planned. In the institutional strength, we have the transition in the leadership is actually going to be one of the biggest issues to deal with. On the risk, I would say that we were on a pretty good path, but we're going to have to pay a very close attention to the budgets, to the finances, to what happens with enrollment. So we might have to pay a little bit of focus on that. So that in a nutshell is how I see this. Thanks.
Thank you, Jitu. And the next speaker will be Ritu. Ritu, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So first of all, my thanks to the nominating committee for giving me this opportunity to be in this forum and run for the Board of Governors. So this is my first time. So I think from the strategic priorities of the board, with the COVID situation that we are in today, I mean, there will be top 3 priorities I think we need to rework and refresh from a board perspective. Number 1 is how do we continue to enhance the continuous learning education program, because I think as a community, whether it is parent, teachers, faculty, I think this is something very new and we have experienced it together. And we have to enhance that, considering it might be a medium haul or a long haul, depending upon how the situation spans out. Of course, the next priority would be to keep the faculty, the talented faculty on board, because there might be a situation that there could be financial stress that might be coming because mobility could be restricted in the medium to the long term. And how we factor that in our students' enrollment growth. And also, when I looked into some of the last priorities in the board minutes, I think balancing of the budgets is also really important. And I think with the situation that we are in today, we need some rigorous planning around, where could find some cost optimization and rationalization around that. Of course, just to give a little bit of introduction about myself. So my daughter is in the kindergarten. I have been in Canada for a while, and I think I'm right now a partner with Deloitte in their financial reporting and capital markets practice. And I think those are the financial accounting skill sets I can read on the board for the strategic priorities to enhance those. Thanks.
Thank you, Ritu. And next we have Sarah. So Sarah, the opening remarks from you, please.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Sarah Cook, and I have served on the board since June of 2018. I'm running for re-election. I'm currently serving as the board treasurer and chair of the finance committee. I'm also on the grant and aid committee and the master planning steering committee. And I also served as chair of the director search committee in the fall. So we are completing our 4th year in India, which is a little hard for me to believe. I have 3 kids at AES. Mimi is in 7th grade, Sophie's in 9th grade, and Nigel is in 11th grade. And let's see, I have my MBA from University of Texas. I did my undergrad at Duke University. In my free time here, I also volunteer as one of the high school cross-country coaches. And those who know me know that I love to run in and around Delhi here. So for me, the top 3 strategic priorities for the next 2 years, like G2, I don't see things changing from what our focus has been. First and foremost, it is to support and promote a long-serving head. And as G2 said, that the best way we can do that is through greater board continuity. So we've identified that as an issue for us. Second would be to ensure the long-term financial health of AES so that we have the resources to develop our campus so that we can continue to compensate our faculty at comparable kind of levels to our peer schools. That enables us to retain and recruit exceptional faculty, and then to maintain healthy reserves. And then third is the successful implementation of the strategic plan, which we're finalizing right now. And this includes preparedness to fulfill our mission even when there are unexpected events such as COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And up next we have Priya. So your opening remarks, please, Priya.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Megan. So let me start by saying I believe I'm a responsible global citizen and a lifelong learner. So I've done my master's from US and from the University of Pennsylvania, and having worked in the US both on the East and West Coast for 8 years and in Asia for a couple of years, I do value how diversity plays a vital role in the growth of an individual. And I value how AES is bringing AES has such diverse communities and respect for one another. So I've been in AES from last 1 year, and my daughter is in grade 5. I'm also in the PSA board. I'm a treasurer there. And I joined just after moving to AES because I believed in the values of the school. Recently, I was a TEDx speaker at AES in November. I took active part in different communities in school, and now I feel I want to contribute by being in the board, by adding values to different stakeholders. So we all work towards the strategic mission of the school, where all our kids are inspired to be the lifelong learners and responsible, compassionate global citizens. I want to bring my skills of finance, general management, strategy, and entrepreneurship to add value to the leadership of the school. In terms of the 3 strategic priorities, I believe maintaining the academics and athletics at par with any other international schools. Obviously, the safety of the school and maintaining that diversity and the respectful environment we have for everyone. Secondly, the reducing our deficit. And thirdly, which I feel after learning from this COVID situation, is investing in the redesigning better online education system of education. I think AES needs to spend some time in finding the right technological tools which satisfies the requirement of elementary, middle, and high school. I would encourage board to invest some time doing independent research on how private schools in US, UK, Singapore, or Japan are doing and how we can learn from that. So ending with a note that the current situation where I think we cannot control, but choosing how to respond is in our control. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Priya. And Courtney will speak next. Courtney?
Thanks, Megan. I'm Courtney Morris. I have 2 children at AES. Apollo is in 5th grade and Asa is in 2nd grade. I'm currently serving as the board president, and I have been the entire year. I've been on the board for 2 years, and I've been at AES for 3 years. I also served as board president at my children's previous international school in Kenya, and I'm a criminal defense attorney by profession. I'm running for re-election as well because I enjoy being on the board. I'm committed to it, and I think I've been a very effective leader this past year. We hired a leader in international education to be our new director, Andy Torres. And I'm also running for re-election because I care deeply that he has a smooth transition to AES. Ideally, the board president who hires the new director sticks around to help him or her acclimate, and I want to see that responsibility through. I can offer, in these past 2 years, I've also provide much needed continuity that you've heard other people running for re-election talk about, and 2 important strategic priorities I want to see through. One is perfecting our strategic plan, which we wrote this year, which captures all of the goals for developing the school, and also pushing forward on our master planning, which is we're trying to reimagine parts of our campus for efficiency and sustainability. I can offer time, commitment, and experience to the board next year like I did this year. And I think that's going to be particularly important during this crisis that we're in, this pandemic, which has caused a building and campus closure. And related to that, 2 additional strategic priorities come up. One is dynamic financial contingency planning. The board needs to look ahead and plan for changes in enrollment and what the school resources will be, and also offer oversight for the online learning program. Our students normally have very full lives. This is all they have. So we have to have a rigorous and thoughtful virtual learning program that's well resourced and adaptive to students' needs and also parents' expectations. And the board needs to collaborate with school leadership to make that happen.
Thank you, Courtney. And Swati, we'll hear from you lastly.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, I'm Swati Vasudevan, a parent at AES for the last 12 years. Anand graduated from AES 2 years ago, and Siddhant is in 11th grade. Our family is a big believer in balanced education, and we have valued and highly supported that philosophy of education for both of our children at AES. The reason why I'm running for the board is the snacks at the board meetings. No, I'm just kidding. First, I've really found my work on the board over the last 2 years as a vice chair and on the various committees, including strategic planning committee, very personally rewarding and fulfilling. And I would very much like to run again to serve, to maintain the momentum on the impactful work that was initiated a couple of years ago. Secondly, the board membership also, I feel, provides me the opportunity to apply my professional skills and experiences to make a contribution to the AES community with 24 years of work experience across a variety of areas, both in for-profit and not-for-profit organizations in 7 different countries. And most recently, as a head of school myself, I feel I have a very deep appreciation for the effectiveness of governance at a diverse school like ours. Strategic priorities that I feel we should focus on are very similar to what Jitu and Courtney just outlined and Sarah emphasized as well. Risk management, outstanding learning, and institutional strengthening. Risk management, obviously, to ensure stability and smooth transition for leadership and for governance sustainability as well. Secondly, systems and policies in place to have continued effectiveness in education during school disruptions. Third, for much needed financial stability. Second, outstanding learning by instituting standard-based learning systems throughout the school. And lastly, strengthening the institution through a facilities master plan. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati. And now we'll go to our next question. So this is for all of the candidates once again. So the question reads, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought a lot of uncertainty to AES, including the possibility that distance learning may need to be extended into the next school year. As a board member, how would you decide whether to maintain building and campus closure or to reopen campus while also ensuring that our diverse community feels included, supported, valued, and heard? And you'll have 90 seconds to answer this question, and the first speaker will be Ritu. Ritu?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I think a very valid question. I think, my daughter is in the kindergarten. I feel that every day, right? When she'll go back to school and she's bored at home as well, right? So I think as a board, I think we have to look at from the interest of all the stakeholders and the community, and health and safety will continue to prevail as the number one priority. We will look into also the government guidelines and how India is coping up with the situation, and especially around the Delhi NCR. And I think once we decide to open it up, there should be, a robust planning exercise in terms of, what are the operating process and how do we implement that? Because social distancing and maintaining that within the school campus and also within the different logistics environment, whether it is a cafeteria, whether it is a library, whether the students are taking the buses, and how do we continue to do that in a safe manner, and how do we continue to monitor that? Now, I know some of the corporate best practices that at least the companies are doing, and something that we could replicate here is if we can have a task force prepared. And we hear from all the communities, like we can have, representatives from the PSA, from the faculty, from the school leadership, and from the board, and monitor this strategically and operationally to ensure that, we come out of it in a very resilient and in a very, I would say, successful manner. And of course, linked with this is I think the enhancement of the digital learning platform, where we think that the connection between the students, the parents, and the faculty are going to play a very important role in carving out the program. Thanks.
Thank you, Ritu. And Sarah, you'll speak next on this question.
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, I think it's fair to say that everyone who's currently on the board fully embraces reopening our campus as soon as it is considered safe to do so. And I'll add that every single board member is still here in New Delhi and actively involved in this decision. So I'm proud to say that. The big challenge here is that this is a dynamic situation. And so we have to listen carefully to all the members of our community who are all over the globe. We have our leadership team, our faculty, our parents, our students in and outside of India. And we also have to work closely with the US Embassy. We operate under their auspices, so we're a little unusual compared to other Delhi schools, and that we've tried this year to make the decision to closely follow what they're doing across the street. Lastly, we have to follow local Indian government regulations, and we weigh all of that evidence in making a decision on when and how we will safely reopen our campus. As a board member, I think the most important thing we can do during this time of uncertainty is just to continue to reassure our community through really strong communication. That is vital. This should be done in close collaboration with our head of school. And I think this is an area where I'll give a shout out to Director Laney and our principals, where I think they have been truly exceptional through this. They have listened to all of us, our community. They've asked for regular feedback, and they've done course corrections. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And we'll go to Priya next.
Thanks, Megan. So I think the decision will be based majorly on three criteria. First of all, the safety of students, teachers, and parents. Secondly, I was thinking, following the official directives, given the situation is very fluid and given situation varies from country to country, it's very important to be consistent with what Indian government is proposing, and also what are the guidelines of US Embassy. And thirdly, delivery through creativity and flexibility. So being flexible on process is very important at this time. And I already mentioned, like, there needs to be some research on the technology platform and finding the right platform for the schools, for different schools, doing some independent research in my introduction. So now, how do we make sure that our diverse community feels valued and heard? So I think 4 ways: informing, connecting, understanding the issues, and maintaining balance to solve the issues. And I believe all this can be achieved by following: having strong connection, deep-rooted connection with the families, having strong connection with PSA, KPSA, and teachers, focused community meetings to understand issues. And the other thing I was thinking recently, that as a board member, it is very important that you have a broader perspective to each problem. Asking why the question has been asked, and then answer. I have noticed many times we are so much involved in things that we start defending ourselves. So listening and respecting everyone's view with broad attitude is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. And then the question will now be answered by Courtney.
Great, thanks, Megan. I want to remind everyone that AES has a commitment to, quote, practice transparent and collaborative decision-making while maintaining effective governance. And Sarah really outlined very well how we've been making decisions during this period. So I don't want to repeat that necessarily, but I want to, assure the association that the board follows the commitment I just read. I follow that commitment, and we collect information in a variety of ways to do that sort of transparent and collective decision making. First of all, we have board meetings and we encourage people to come and ask questions. We have committees that faculty and parents join. We're on WhatsApp groups. We attend all kinds of events now on Zoom. We attend PSA meetings. We review the survey data that's taken from the community, and we're in the community. We pay attention to what the community feels. We have friends and colleagues, and we cherish the feedback that we get from all of you. And on the board itself, we have a lot of healthy debate. We're constantly listening to one another and hearing different views that are brought to the board from different constituencies. So we weigh all of that information. We weigh information from the diplomatic community. We're sensitive to signals from the government of India. So we use information both inside and outside the community to make the best decisions we can during a lockdown or any other period. I just want to close by saying I read an article today that says during a crisis, you need stability, direction, safety, and clarity. And I think the board has worked with the school leadership to hit those ideals, and I'd like to continue doing that if I'm reelected.
Thank you for sharing, Courtney. And Swati, you'll answer the question next.
Thanks, Megan. I feel there are always trade-offs and no right answers in such dynamic situations. So it's important to keep in mind the overall objective and the primary mission of the institution. And in this case, the student education is really the North Star that's guiding us, along with the wellness and safety of our community. Since the teachers are critical to imparting that education, support of the teacher community is just as important as well. So there are 3 things that I would recommend we do. 1, scenario planning. Second, learn from others. And third, take a differentiated approach to the 3 different schools. But most importantly, I think we also need to engage the community in collecting and analyzing feedback on how well things are working and be willing to make adjustments as we go. So the first one, we have to plan for various scenarios so that we've really thought things through already, such as how not to overburden a particular constituent in one of our decisions for one of the scenarios. Second, we aren't the only ones in this boat, as we all know, and there's a lot to learn from other international schools, colleges, and independent studies on what's working well, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And lastly, one size doesn't fit all. The needs of an elementary school student are very different from that of a high schooler who's doing an IB or AP course, for example. So the decisions have to be sensitive to those respective challenges. I think all that said, we also have to be compliant with the local regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati. And lastly, we'll hear from G2 on this question. G2?
Sure. Thanks, Megan. This is not a question of when we do it, but this is what we've been living through for the last 2 months. It's been almost a daily thing. So you heard a lot of great answers over there, and I completely agree with every part of that. So one thing I will mention that has really helped us to figure out how to open up the school and what to do in terms of understanding the scenario is making sure that we are able to balance the needs of this being a consensus decision, almost involving the administration, involving the authorities, the U.S. Embassy, the board. The board pulls the trigger, but at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of people who have to contribute to that decision. So that's been done really well this year, I feel, and there's been a lot of input into that, which has made the board's life really easy in terms of navigating that. At the same time, it's a very, very dynamic situation. And so we've had meetings every other day at certain points. We've had to navigate through that. So I think that in addition to everything that you heard about, the balance between student safety and the emotional well-being, complying with government regulations and wanting to see ethics in board, there's almost this flavor of how you work in addition that you have to pay attention to as much as what the content is of how you're going to, what is it that you're going to use to take up a decision. So with this in place, that's how we have been navigating, and I think that's the way we'd like to do it in the future as well. Thanks.
Thank you, G2, and thank you to all the candidates for answering that question. We'll move on to the next question. It says, the AES budget is on everyone's mind as the pandemic may alter our enrollment numbers and require dipping into our reserves. How would you work to balance the needs of our programs, staff, faculty, and families with the long-term financial health of the school? You'll have 90 seconds to answer this question, and Sarah will answer the question first. Sarah?
Okay, thanks, Megan. Well, as current board treasurer, am I unmuted? Yes, okay. As current board treasurer, I'll say that our long-term financial health weighs very heavily on my shoulders, as it does for many of us here tonight. We have made enormous progress with our enrollment numbers and made needed improvements to our faculty compensation so that our administration can attract the most exceptional teachers out there. The current board did this by conditionally approving a multi-year budget starting in this year that uses accrued operating reserves over the next 4 years. We had already approved the budget for next year before COVID hit us, and we're already dipping into our reserves, which we thankfully have for times such as this. So what are we doing right now in light of the pandemic? First, we are exploring every way possible to work with any family who is experiencing financial hardship. So if you haven't done so already, please let us hear from you. We've also increased the grant and aid fund for next year in anticipation that many of our self-paying families will need some assistance. We've prepared contingency budgets that plan for a 10, 20, and 40% decline in enrollment. We're also carefully looking at each and every expense line item so that we're judicious in our use of reserves and we keep our fee increases as minimal as possible. We're in the business of student learning. So every decision about our finances really has to safeguard our mission and maintain our quality of instruction and ensure that the financial health of AES is sound for 50 years down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and we'll hear from Priya next. Priya?
Thanks, Megan. I think two ways. First is obviously revenue generation, and secondly, assessment of cost situation. So I was thinking the revenue generation can be done in two ways, as we all know. Firstly, raising the funds for school, and second, increasing enrollment. So now in terms of raising funds, I'm not sure, but I would like to explore if AES can raise funds from AES alumni base. For increasing enrollment, I would like to explore more information by connecting with admission and see how I can help them strategically. So additional, if we can explore ways of reaching out to more expat population in India, finding ways to reach out to the untapped student profile. So this is from the revenue generation point of view. Now, secondly, from the assessment of cost situation. I think making a detailed analysis of essential cost versus non-essential cost, fixed versus variable, and making sure that we are ready for the future. Thoughtful plan for the online versus offline education system. And I think in order to achieve both revenue generation and assessment of cost situation, prioritizing the areas of investment, doing a scenario-based planning. Also, if we can add up some benchmarking studies with similar schools globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. And Courtney, you'll answer the question next.
Great. And this is a really important question because I know it's weighing on everyone's mind. So I'm going to just try to step back a little bit and say that balancing competing interests in any situation is tough, but particularly budgeting. And with all strategy and planning that the board does, we have to keep our mission as our guiding principle. And we all know our mission is student-centered, to encourage the joyful pursuit of excellence in academics, athletics, arts, and service. And our primary responsibility when doing the school's budget is to make sure that student learning comes first. So the income that the school receives is entirely from tuition, and it's used to maintain that best programming. We need to make sure we have enough income to support the outstanding education we offer, delivered by highly prepared, highly competent teachers, coaches, counselors, staff, everyone who contributes, whether it's online or whether it's on campus. So we have announced a tuition increase for next year, and because we want to stay on track with the long-term financial planning that Sarah mentioned, and try to decrease the deficit that we're in now. Last year, the board approved this type of budget in no small part to really help with salaries and benefits for our teachers, and to offset some Indian law requirements that sort of cut into their take-home pay. And we also took steps to create pay equity between overseas hires and local hires. And so, hiring and retaining the best faculty means the best programming, and that supports our mission. That said, the association should know that during contingency financial planning, if I could just beg the indulgence of the panel for a couple minutes, because I really think this is important to say, we are reviewing all costs, and that's what happens during contingency planning. And we're really trying to balance the needs of families in the way that Sarah said, which is boosting grant and aid, returning money when we can, and trying to, relax payment schedules. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Courtney. And Swati, you'll answer the question next.
Thanks.
Swati?
I think that the short answer to that question is balanced approach, balance between short-term and long-term sustainability. In the short term, I think we do need to dip into the reserves, it's very clear, to tide over the crisis and to support our faculty, our staff, and the students who do need the support. But we can't dip too much either. So we also have to manage our costs well, but without compromising the quality of our programming. So we have to identify such costs very carefully and take a look at them, reconsider possibly delaying, or just take another look at it. And as they say, then never let a good crisis go waste. So I feel this is also a good time for us to reinvent ourselves, and not just from a cost perspective, but also quality of our education programming. In parallel, we have to keep an eye on stabilizing enrollment through better outreach in NCR and building awareness for AES's value proposition and offering. Lastly, tuition increases are also an important consideration, but that's also a very delicate balancing act. The more you increase tuition, the more enrollment will decline. So any decision on tuition increases has to take into consideration all these factors, and also various financial plans that are modeled for various scenarios, future scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati. And Jitu, you'll answer the question next. Jitu?
Sure. So first of all, let me say this: we are actually in pretty good shape. So I don't want it to seem that we're in doom and gloom. Yes, we are in a very serious place that we have to look at contingency planning, and I completely agree with what Sarah, Swati, and Courtney had mentioned. That's some of the inside look at what's happening on the board. But the part that I feel really good about is the fact that we are actually on a long-term course that will require some adjustment, but very little fundamental rethink. So here's where we are. As Sarah mentioned, a couple of years ago, we decided to run a deficit budget for 4 years, primarily in order to focus on student learning and around the faculty issue, which we have addressed in a number of different ways that Courtney mentioned. Now that worked. And the other part of that was to make sure that the enrollment was actually going up to a point at which we could actually be at least a break even. And we were supposed to do this in 4 years, but I think that we were on track to meet it next fall, well ahead of schedule. That was great, but now comes COVID. So we are back again 2 steps behind. But the good news is that we had already planned for that. So I don't see that we need to make too much of an adjustment in this. Like we have the scenarios that we are talking about in multiple different ways. But I would basically say that the kind of legwork that we put into it going up front has given us a fair degree of flexibility. It still means that we can afford to evaluate certain plans like. We're talking about student aid. We're still talking about making sure that we actually go on to various programs for faculty and so on. So I think we are on course on that front.
Thank you, Jitu. Ritu, you'll answer the question last. So Ritu, when you're ready.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So I think this is a really important question, and I think everybody, whether it's in the school community or any industry or any sector, they are grappling through it. So a couple of thoughts that I have. I mean, we have to take a more longer term view. I mean, at the end of the day, what is essentially needed and what AES is known for is, that's diverse community, the diverse student enrollment, the great talented teachers and the faculty who come from different parts of the world, right? And also the great infrastructure that we have. And we have to continue to maintain that, right? There might be a short to mid-term kind of a contingency that we are in today. And I think that will put a little bit of stress on the budget, definitely. But I think there are ways to look around that. I mean, for me, the first priority will be how do we plug that in terms of a working capital management, because ultimately we have to manage the cash flow. So in the short term and the medium term, I think that's going to be a challenge. I mean, I don't have that much of visibility in the student enrollment and the growth, but definitely I feel that if there's a mobility restriction in the short to medium term, then there might be situations that we see a dip in the student enrollment, but probably that would go up in a U-shaped or V-shaped recovery in the later part. But things that I would focus on is keeping a contingency plan in terms of the working capital to keep the cash moving, get the teachers and the faculty and their salaries getting paid. And of course, look for any kind of cost optimization possible out of the operating cost bucket. I think that could be, some things that I would look on. Thanks.
Thank you for your response, Ritu, and thanks to all the candidates. We've got one more planned question before we move on to the questions from the community. So the last question says, AES has several major leadership transitions underway, including bringing in new director, Dr. Torres, and new elementary school principal, Mr. Bellany. How would you identify potential issues and use your skills and experience to ensure a smooth process? And you'll have 90 seconds to answer this question. Priya, the first response is yours.
Thanks, Megan. So first of all, I would like to welcome Dr. Torres and Mr. Bellamy. I don't know whether they are in the call, but I would like to welcome them. So I would develop a 5-step process. Firstly, get a feedback from the relevant stakeholders to identify potential issues. The stakeholders are basically the teachers, staff, students, parents, and prepare a detailed template of the issues, put a timeline and priority. That would be the second step. The third would be knowledge transfer document from existing director and existing principal. Fourth would be proper induction of the director and as well as new elementary school principal with families and teachers along with PSA and KPSA. And fifth point, which is my last suggested point, is suggest a weekly Zoom call with parents initially, even after we resume school in a normal manner in August, if that happens. So the working parents are also engaged. Now, in order to achieve this 5-step process, the skills I would like to use is the first is facilitative leadership, using my entrepreneurial skills to ability to solve the problems. And third, most important, is finding the right resources to get the answers. So I would be new, so I would not know a lot more things, but finding that right resources and getting the right answers and communicating it to. And lastly, very important, is be proactive so that the issues do not get bigger later. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. And Courtney, you'll answer the question next. Courtney?
Sure, thanks, Megan. Transition to this new administration is absolutely a huge issue for the school. And one of the primary reasons I'm running for re-election. I feel very strongly about seeing this transition through and using the experience I've gained on the board for the last 2 years to help Andy Torres in particular make this transition. Continuity of board members is important during a transition like this, and especially when the school is in crisis and dealing with the COVID pandemic like we are. As board president, I've already started the transition process for Andy, and I'll give you some examples. He and I talk regularly on the phone, one-on-one, and I try to offer my take on things and give him key elements of AES's special culture and identity. I encourage other board members to speak to him as well. Swati has spoken to him about strategic planning, Sarah about financial planning. I've set up a small transition team, and Nada Collins is helping with put together a virtual tour of the school where we're gonna try this one on for size. We've also shared board material with him, like policy manuals, past minutes, our draft strategic plan, and he has been included in select board and committee meetings. As for Charles, as you all know, the board has one employee, and that's the director of the school. So anything that happens below the director of the school is really the director's responsibility. The board is going to be helpful, I think, in Charles's transition, but Nada is really going to be leading that charge, I think, as the departing elementary school principal.
Thank you for sharing, Courtney. And Swati, you'll answer the question next. Swati?
Thanks, Megan. So when I took over my role at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for a few years ago, here are some of the things I found helpful for my transition. One, overlap. Second, a 90-day plan. And third, communication, both frequent and with all stakeholders. So on the first one, I feel Dr. Collins' new role as DD will provide that continuity overlap and help us balance the institutional knowledge with fresh thinking and new ideas brought in by the new leadership stepping in. Secondly, I would highly recommend a concrete 90-day plan, both for Dr. Torres and for Mr. Bellamy, that gives them really the space to onboard and do a lot of listening to the community while also keeping an eye on the immediate priorities. Third, communication. Frequent touch points between the board and Andy and his leadership team will really help us all stay informed, provide inputs, and most importantly, help us support the leadership team. Similarly, the monthly board reports from the PSA rep, the student rep, the faculty rep, along with the structured surveys by the same communities that we do in the year, will really help the leadership team and the board retain or maintain and keep the pulse of the community sentiment. The bottom line I feel is that AES is a very resilient community, and we have strong fundamentals and good values, and I think they'll hold us up.
Thank you, Swati. Jitu, can you answer the question next?
Sure. Well, any transition is hard, and we do have to think about all the plans in place. And I think that you heard about quite a few of them from Courtney, from Sarah, from Swati, about what we've already been doing. Andy's already been part of our board meetings for the last couple of times. And I'd say we're lucky to have the leaders that we have in place right now. So here's a big shout out to Jim for actually being very proactive in transitioning his role to Andy ahead of schedule. And like the COVID part certainly helped to bring that together. Andy himself has been very proactive on that. Nada's presence as deputy director is something that we didn't imagine that this is what it would come to when we actually created that role. We did it for the transition overall, but that's really going to help. But one thing I would say is that the leadership transition, while the board actually has a big role to play in it, we have to remember that the transition is not just for the director or the elementary school principal. It's actually for everybody working with them. It's for the whole school. And so I would actually encourage all of us to actually reach out and try to make this a much more positive experience. As the board members, we have a certain responsibility to do that. And that's from a fairly generative governance kind of perspective, looking at the school as a whole. But there's so many small aspects everywhere. And I think that every one of us actually really has a role to play in that. And knowing Andy, I'm pretty confident that he'll come out of it well with everybody's support, and same with Charles and everybody else over here. I'm really hopeful about that.
Thank you, Jitu. And we'll hear from Ritu next. Ritu?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I think, I mean, transition in any role is important and it takes its due time, right? And for the situation that we are in today, where we have, conflicting strategic priorities and different stakeholders and health and safety taking the primary importance, right? Whoever comes in, I think I was in the PSA meeting yesterday, and I virtually met, both Andrew and Charles. And I think they're really excited about the role that they are in, and about AES and then joining in as a family. And I think as a board, we have that absolute accountability and responsibility to make them successful, right? And typically, the transition needs to be planned, and I do agree that there needs to be some planning around the timelines, some planning around the inductions, the meetings, the different stakeholders and the community that they're going to meet. And it's not just about just looking at the minutes and the policies. I mean, more than that, getting into the character of the school and knowing about the DNA of the institution, and in a virtual reality that we are in today, where everything is happening on Zoom, right? I think that transition needs to be more connected, needs to be more personal to some extent. And I think some of the practices that we follow, in the corporate sector, we talk about induction workshops and transition workshops, right? With different stakeholders, where we invite and we handhold them through this entire process. And I think this is something we can think of, to get them up to speed. Thanks.
Thank you, Ritu. And lastly, we're going to hear from Sarah on this question. Sarah?
Okay, thanks, Megan. So Andy is on this call along with 74 other people, and so is Charles. So welcome, Andy. I had the honor of serving on the search committee and was one of the 13 people who helped identify him as our next leader. I'm very proud of that, because I think, 5 years down the road, our community is going to talk about our beloved director, Andy Torres. And so he is as many of our current board members already mentioned, he is our one employee, the one employee of the board. And so I really see our role is doing everything possible to make sure that he is long serving here at AES. To support him, we have hired an exceptional leader, so to support him to do his job. Other than that, I think it's that we continue to focus on the strategic priorities that we've outlined as a board and stay the course. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so that concludes our planned portion of the event. It's time now for the community question and answer portion. We would now like to invite our community members to pose questions to all candidates, one specific candidate, just the incumbents, or just the challengers. Please type your questions into the Q&A area as the chat feature is disabled. Answers will be timed to 1 minute each. Please identify yourself with your question and let us know your name and your role at AES. We will not entertain anonymous questions. So I'll give just a couple of seconds here if people want to type in a question. And we actually already have a couple. So I'll read the first question and then I'll offer it up to the candidates in a rotation format. And the candidates can choose either to accept the question or to pass on the question. So here's the first question. My name is Eugene Bay, and I am a parent of high school and middle school students. My question to the board candidates is, if you could change one thing about AES, be it financial, educational, physical, or anything, what would it be? And as a follow-up question, if elected to the board, how do you see yourself working with the admin, other board members, and faculty, staff, or students to accomplish this change? So first up to answer the question is Courtney. Courtney, would you like to answer the question?
Great. Thanks, Eugene. I think my answer is definitely educational, and I wouldn't say a change so much as a perfection, because again, this relates directly to the mission of the school. we are in a period where we are building our online virtual learning program, and we've come very far, but we need to go further. The faculty and the administrators have worked so hard this semester to turn on a dime and begin virtual learning. It's gotten better, more synchronous, more thoughtful, more adaptive to feedback. And the board has frankly played a role in not choosing the curriculum, but asking hard questions about making sure the program is the best that it can be. And I think when we can get even better next semester, particularly if we will need to offer online learning, which I think we will in some degree. And as Andy told me once on one of our phone calls, any international school now has to have a proper online learning program that it can pull down from the shelf and turn on overnight. And I think it's the school's responsibility and the board's responsibility to offer oversight that this program be created and be created well.
Thank you, Courtney. Swati, would you like to answer the question?
Yes, I would love to. In fact, there are two things which I feel I'd love to look at. One, Courtney's already touched upon, which is on the learning aspect. But just to kind of add a little bit of color to that, it's more specific. We've had standard-based grading instituted in the school for quite some time, but we don't have standard-based learning systems, especially across the verticals. And as Anthea had said once, we've kind of put the cart before the horse. So those systems would now need to be put into place. So I think that's one thing which is just something we just need to do. And so that's one. But to answer your question, Eugene, I think that if there's one thing that I would need to change, that I'd like to change, it would be governance sustainability. That's because I feel our board is very thinly resourced, not able to cover all the committees that we have. It's got short tenures, so we lose a lot of institutional knowledge. And third, there's not a single independent board member who does not have children at the school to provide that additional objectivity. And if elected, I think this would require working on changes to the charter itself. So of course, I'll have to work with the board, the policy committee, and the entire association to make those changes to the charter to make that happen.
Thank you, Swati. Jitu?
Sure. I agree with Swati and Courtney on the learning and the policy part, and I would like to focus on the policy part. And there are a couple of areas. One of which Swati talked about, making sure that we actually do have the changes to the charter, which will help us be better on governance. And the other part, which we are handicapped with, is that AES is subject to a lot of government laws, which none of the other schools are subject to. Like, for example, the British school across the road has a very different floor area ratio that they have. They can build up a lot more for facilities for students, which we can't. It's these kinds of regulations that I think that we'll need to pay a little bit of attention to. The major stakeholder here is the US Embassy. And so when you're talking about the board, there's the administration, there's the board, there's the US Embassy. Hands are a little bit tight, but that's actually where I think that we have to work with the US Embassy a lot to make sure that we have to turn the ship. The ship will turn. It will take a long time, but that's one of the things that I think we need to pay attention to. Thanks.
Thank you, Jitu. And Ritu, would you like to answer the question?
Yes, so I think I would look at probably two priorities or two things rather, if we can enhance, right? I mean, I'm not sure I want to use the word change. The first one is actually, it has been touched upon, enhancing the digital learning. And I think my own experience, right, with a 5.5-year-old daughter that I have, I think platform is one part. And also the second part is how to keep them motivated and engaged, right, in a remote environment, right? And I think developing a routine, developing a one-on-one connection, doing some synchronous meeting, like one-on-one meetings on Zoom, with the teachers, I think that is very, very important. The second piece on the emotional well-being, right? I mean, the kids, they want to go to school, they want to meet friends, right? They want to have a circle of their own. And I think the world that we are in today, they are missing that, right? So how we can replicate that in a remote environment to the extent possible? I know there cannot be a perfect answer towards that. And I think driving from it is a need of, a strategic focus around alliances and innovation, right? So if you want to, enhance this platform, how do we go about doing it? The budgets around that, a plan around that, and what are the alliances that we need to play? So that's it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Sarah?
Yes, thanks. Okay. Thanks, Eugene, for that question. So first of all, I have to echo Swati's comment. I think everyone on the board agrees that we are handicapped in a way because of the size of the board and these 2-year terms. So I completely agree with her that that would be a wonderful change and hopefully something that can happen in the near future. But the one that immediately came to mind for me, and I haven't talked about recently, but I think G2, Courtney, and Swati will remember this, is I really would love to see us have a more robust service learning program where we really take advantage, and G2 is smiling. But this is something that I feel like, we live in India and there's so many opportunities down the street, so many wonderful opportunities for our students to learn and really be engaged within the community. We have the opportunity we just went through the MSA credential process, and we've talked about making it a program of distinction the next time that we go up for reaccreditation. So that's something that I would love to see happen for AES to make us kind of a differentiator in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And Priya, the last response is yours if you'd like it.
Yeah, I would like to answer. So I think for me, maintaining that academic standards in athletics is top priority, right? So maintaining that at par with the other international schools would be my top priority, and would be my objective to enhance those services. For that, it may require hiring best teachers, and most importantly, now we are in a situation where it would require little bit research and study on the technological platform, finding the right platform for the middle school, for the elementary school, for the high school, and making sure that that technology platform is safe for our kids. So that is very important for me. And then how will I make sure that happens is I would make sure that I work with all the stakeholders involved, like the teachers, the staff, and the parents, very collaborative. And since we all are in a learning stage, I would happy to encourage people to come up their suggestions, and I would work very collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Okay, next question. Oh, and sorry I didn't hold up the card there. Okay, the next question is from Kripal Singh, the middle school and high school speech and language pathologist. The question reads, what is your take on inclusive education? How will you contribute to growth in this area? And the first person to respond to the question, if they so choose, is Swati.
Thanks, Megan. I'd love to think about that question. It's an important one because I think inclusive education is right in alignment with our mission. This is going to be not easy. It requires kind of change management, especially with our limited resources, but it's an imperative. It's something that we must do to really stay true to our mission. And it kind of takes us closer to personalized education, if I can put it that way. The good thing is it was a part of our strategic goals last year. So a strategy has already been developed for inclusive education. Some resource planning has already happened, and I know I think some resources got hired this year to further the inclusive education strategy. Some training for the teachers is also starting. And again, I want to come back to what I started with. This is not going to be easy because it's almost like having our teachers to do now extra training on how to handle these different special situations, but something we've got to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati. G2, you can answer the question next if you'd like.
Sure. Kripal, thanks for that question. I think it resonates very, very closely with what we've been talking about on and off at the board. And as Swati said, we put it into the strategic plan because we think it is really important. Now, there are a couple of things over here. Like, it aligns very well with the school's mission, as Swati mentioned. We are committed to actually making it happen. We think it's important for the students to study in this environment where they actually see learning as far more holistic than anything that they might individually experience otherwise. So having said all that, we are also trying to figure out how to devote the resources. We can't do everything together at once. So there's this question of how do we actually stage this out? What what's the best way we can actually bring this out. And I think that we are happy that the administration is also very, very supportive and aligned on that whole thing. So I think as a school, we are thinking about this, and I think we have a lot of support within the community for this as well. So I would say that it's a good place to be. Thanks.
Thank you, Jitu. And Ritu, the next response is yours.
Yeah, so I think a couple of thoughts from my end here. To me, the inclusive education would define, I mean, are we catering to the needs of the individual students, right? And in a classroom environment that is more easier to do that in a remote environment, right? So it is important that, as I said, to keep maintain the connection in the smaller groups, understanding the needs of the students, because even in a class, the different students might have different levels of motivation, engagement, and the capacity to pick up things in the curriculum, right? So a counseling session which is more connected, even having maybe a Zoom call or Zoom chat or videos with the counselors, whether it is elementary, high school, middle school, will be very important to understand their needs and aspirations. And also, I think by the virtue that I'm in Deloitte, I mean, I can bring in probably all the best practices that we followed across, whether globally or within the country, regarding the space of diversity, inclusion, and all the strategic resources that the board may need in a timely manner. Thanks.
Thank you, Ritu. Sarah, you can answer the question next.
Okay, oh, I'm already unmuted. Okay, really quickly, I am fully supportive of inclusion. I think that it is directly aligned with our mission and our values. It's something that makes us stronger as a community, and it's in our strategic plan already. So we are fully supportive. My role in terms of supporting it as a board member would be to make sure that our faculty have the proper professional development and training so that they feel they're supported in the classroom as we're looking to implement inclusion. I think also we have to look at our capital projects and make sure that we have the facilities that support inclusive education as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And Priya, would you like to answer the question next?
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I would like to answer. So I think for inclusivity means like there is inclusivity in class and the inclusivity of parents, right? So there are two ways if you have to think through it. So I was thinking, yes, for the kids, we have to provide that atmosphere. And I think the AES is already doing a great job in doing that. And now in terms of because of the current situation we are put where we are doing a lot of work through technology. So we want to make sure that we are providing right technology platform to our students, our kids. So for that also, I think there is a deep need to include parents in that discussion. And I mean, as an entrepreneur, I have always think that many great ideas, creative ideas comes up when there is a crisis. So to answer, yes, this is much needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. And Courtney, your chance to answer the question is now.
Sure. I'd like to say that one of the things that I've learned by being a board member these past 2 years is really to expand my thinking about what inclusion means and what our culture of belonging means. And yes, it is a sort of a classic educational context, but I'll give you some other examples. When I was policy committee chair last year, we wrote the first policy for the school for the protection and sensitivity toward LGBTQ students. We wrote the first whistleblowing policy for the school for people on the staff who feel that they're not being listened to potentially about potential wrongdoing. And finally, we heard a lot of heartache in this last year for students who couldn't travel for athletics because of their nationality and they weren't accepted in certain countries. So I think growth about thinking about inclusion means broadening our aspect of inclusion, talk about the whole student body and the faculty and parents.
Thank you for your response, Courtney. We'll move on to question number 3. This is from Janice McClinch, a parent. Would the school consider hiring more teachers locally to keep fees down through the crisis? What are some of the ways the school is trying to keep the fees down for families? And the first response is from Jitu, if you'd like to answer. Jitu?
Sure. If I understand the question right, it was more along a cost basis, saying that would we consider hiring local teachers because that will keep the costs down. The short answer would be, for me, no, because that's not going to help, and that's not going to be in keeping with the mission of the school. I think we have a fantastic teacher population over here, and we want to make sure that they are actually motivated to come up and grow at AES. We are trying to actually bring a lot more parity between the local teachers and the international teachers for reasons of fairness, for reasons of performance, all kinds of things. But that kind of takes away the whole cost angle to your question. Now, there are other ways to make sure that we actually don't have a fee rise. We are actually trying to keep our fees very, very low. If you look at AES's fee rises, it's actually been the lowest among any of the international schools in Asia. We've actually benchmarked this. And we're trying to do it very minimally and trying to complement it by rising enrollment. So the short answer is there's other ways of actually making sure that the fees don't go up for the families. They're pretty high already. But going local is not going to be the answer to combating the fee rise from a cost perspective. And I don't think I would be in support of that.
Thank you, Jitu. Ritu, you can answer the question next.
Yeah, so I kind of echo what Jitu is saying, because I think AES is known for the diversity and the international exposure of the faculty that they bring in. And that's why actually personally, I have put my kid there, right? From transferring off from a very renowned local institution, right? So I think we will continue to hold that character strong. Now, I know there will be a pressure because of the situation that we are in today. Now, how do we want to deal with that? So I think there are ways. I mean, as I said, we are going to take a longer term view rather than a shorter and the midterm. So if we can, think through alternative sources of funding to keep that, the talented teachers on board. If we think there is a financial crunch that we are facing, how do we effectively, look at the working capital? There are different ways of doing that professionally, right? I mean, you have scenario planning, you have different kind of statistical modeling and all. I'm not going into that, but I think the character of the school has to be there, right? The international student needs to be there. The diverse community that we are in, we should continue to maintain that. And, as a board, we'll try to do that as strong as possible.
Thank you, Ritu. Sarah, you're next.
Well, I mostly agree with what everyone is saying, except that I will say to Janice that, we do have, there are times that we find a wonderful, talented teacher. We have these faculty distinctions between, we call it overseas-based, overseas hired, overseas-based local hire, and local hires. And so we have these times where we find wonderful teachers who, while we are moving towards greater parity across the faculty groups, they present themselves. They're here as a trailing spouse, and that's wonderful when we can hire them. So we have, a wonderful science teacher in the middle school, and I shouldn't start calling out people because there are a lot of you out there. So that's always wonderful when we can do that hire. We are also looking at many different expenses that do not directly impact student learning, or program costs. So that's something that we're very focused on right now. Tech purchase cycling, for example, is one. So there are a lot of ways that we are trying to be, as I said, really judicious with our budget for next year to keep our costs down.
Thank you, Sarah. The next response will be from Priya. Priya?
Thanks, Megan. So I think I've already mentioned, for me, the biggest strategic priority is maintaining that academics and athletics at par with any other global school. So I think, and I do value the diversity which AES brings in. And we want our kids to grow in such diverse atmosphere. So I think I would not agree to that point. I would suggest that we continue to hire the best teachers globally. And then in terms of, we have to find out ways of, we have to go back to our balance sheet and find out ways how we can reduce our cost. So I think that we have to study further, then decreasing or reducing our international teachers. So thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Courtney, to you next.
Yes, thank you, Megan. And hi, Janice. Yes, I think the heart of the matter here is we have families, longstanding families in the community who are self-paying. And, you know, it is absolutely true, and I want to be honest about it, that next year the school is going to feel financial pressure. Every independent school out there is going to feel financial pressure, and families are already starting to feel pressure. So how do we handle that? Absolutely, we've heard now cost cutting is going to be important. Hiring local teachers is less expensive, but it does cut down on the diversity and promise of AES that people depend on when they send their children there. So the question is, what is the board going to do, or what can it do to help out families who have to bear this financial burden of the COVID pandemic by themselves? And I've mentioned we're really trying to be sensitive about boosting our grants to families, extending deadlines by which payments are made or refunds are made, giving refunds where we can. And this is a dynamic process. We are continuing to meet for the rest of this year to find the best solutions that we can.
Thank you, Courtney. And lastly, we'll go to Swati. Swati?
Thanks, Megan. I think the one thing that does truly differentiate AES from the other international schools locally is, and by the way, that's where most of our competition comes from, which is local international schools. So what differentiates us is our international faculty, and not just international student body, because that a lot of other schools also have. So it's very important to maintain that ratio of international teachers and local teachers. Now, that said, I think what's important is quality teachers with international experience. Whether we find them in International School of China to bring them here, or whether they happen to be locally based in India, that's relatively less important. So what I'm trying to say is the school may look at that on a case-to-case basis, where opportunities may find and may present themselves as they have in the past, and we've got some really good talent locally as well. But I would say that would be Andy's prerogative and not within board's purview. So thank you.
Thank you, Swati. The next question is just for the incumbent candidates. It's from Monisha Ramani. It says, to the 4 board members who are running for re-election, what would you say, apart from COVID-19, was your most challenging situation which you recall from your last term? Thank you. So we'll go to Sarah first for this question. Sarah?
Okay, well, this seems like ages ago, but when we joined the board, I remember we first of all had some unexpected turnover pretty quickly, where a board member, our treasurer, ended up going home. So I stepped in as treasurer, I think in October of my first term. And, you know, I feel like we'll be really candid here. We were looking at several directors in the past year, faculty morale issues, around compensation because of G2 references earlier, but because of Provident Fund and compliance there, it wound up that they were suddenly earning less than they had been. And so we knew that we needed to make improvements to our salaries and benefits, but enrollment was declining. So it felt like a bit of a conundrum for us. Thankfully, Ilva Kovac has really helped in terms of turning our enrollment around. And I feel like, you know, we've made improvements to our faculty salaries and benefits, but that was a huge challenge for us as a board. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. The next response will be from Courtney.
Sure, thanks. I think Sarah would also agree that the most challenging thing that's happened in this past year is the hiring of the new director. And while it was incredibly challenging, it was also inspiring to realize how every single board member cared so much about who the next director of the school was going to be. We're leaving, you know, Jim is leaving us with 3 very strong years, a very strong tenure at the school. And so we were concerned that we were going to do right by AES. And that was a very big decision. And one, we had a very strong process, thanks to our search committee. And Andy emerged as the clear choice, but not without a lot of time, a lot of emotion, and a lot of very animated discussion. And I will say we really dove deep into our exercising of good governance. And one of the protocols of good governance is really constructive conflict. And we had a lot of it, but I think the other rule is when you have constructive conflict, you come out with the best solution. And so I would say that was challenging, but turned out very well.
Thank you, Courtney. We'll go to Swati next. Swati?
Thanks, Megan. Actually, I was going to say the same situation that Sarah described. Here's how I would describe the situation. The school facing declining enrollment for years since the Cobra Gadi situation. Second, challenges in attracting quality teachers. And third, tight operating budgets. I mean, it's like a classic case study. So as a board, we really went through a hard time. We in deliberating on that one because we had a lot of conversation, a lot of different points of view, and we finally did unanimously agree on the importance of investing, even in such times, in fact, more so in such times, investing in creating that enabling environment that can attract really good quality teachers by investing in the salaries and benefits. And to dip into the reserves and raise tuition a bit to make that happen, which was a very tough call. It is a very difficult decision, but we took that. I thought that was probably the hardest part. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati. And lastly, we'll hear from Jitu.
So I'm going to have a similar response. So I remember coming into the board in 2018, and we were like a bunch of rookies. I mean, practically everybody was new on the board, and we had the director from Johannesburg come in, and he told us at one of these meetings, saying that he said, "Guys, I've got to tell you, AES isn't the place it used to be. It's not. The gloss is worn off." So that was actually a point at which it seemed really, really difficult to figure out what we were supposed to be doing at that point of time. How do you actually turn around this enrollment issue, the balancing the budgets, the teacher morale, all of that kind of stuff. So that definitely was the most challenging. And I'm actually a little amused and not surprised at all that none of us actually mentioned the COVID situation as being the most challenging thing. It's not. It's definitely not. It was actually a turning around of the school in so many ways that was actually the most challenging one for me, and it lasted for a very long time. Thanks.
Thank you, Jitu. The next question will be our final question. And this question is also just for the incumbents. It says, "My name is Sona Puri, and my question is for the incumbents. The board and administration have talked about capital enhancements to the school with regard to construction and building remodeling. Can you shed some more light on these, given the change in circumstance and the possibility of a decrease in tuition and overall revenue? Do you intend to review these projects moving forward?" So let's see. So we'll go to Courtney first for this question.
Sure, thanks. Hi, Sona. Thanks for your question. I think the short answer is it's already being reviewed. Every summer, as you probably know, we have a raft of projects that we do to upgrade the school, both necessary, like we don't want kids falling through the pool, or, things that we have to do. But then, building new pods and enhancing certain educational spaces. Those have already been pared down extensively. And also the COVID pandemic has introduced new challenges in terms of what we need to do. Like, for example, when you have 80 kids rushing into the 5th grade pod and they all have to wash their hands, and there's one sink. So there are certain things that we have to do to make sure that the school is safe. And those are kind of taking over the longer term projects. However, I mentioned in my first answer about strategic planning, we have hired a world-class firm for master planning for our school. And efficiency and sustainability are crucial, particularly like for pollution protection in the high school. That's still on the list, actually, of a project that we're maintaining.
Thank you, Courtney. And we'll go to Swati next. Swati, would you like to answer the question?
Absolutely, would love to. In fact, I would echo a lot of what Courtney said. The short answer to your question, Sona, is absolutely. Everything is on the table. There are no sacred cows, and everything is going to be relooked at in the spirit of maintaining our long-term sustainability, given where we are at, without compromising the quality of our programming. So even though there is a demarcation between capital budgets and operating budgets, and we are much better placed on our capital budget reserves, and it's the operating budgets that are facing more of the pressure, but it just gives us a good opportunity And it's a good practice in general to take a look at everything. So we are going to look at the capital budgets as well, of including the projects that were approved earlier. But we are going to prioritize. For example, there are certain things in that, such as what Courtney was mentioning, the high school building. It's open rooftop. During pollution days, it's in a bad shape. We are exposing our students. So there was a project in the list which has to do with that. So that probably and most likely will continue. The others will get reprioritized or may get reprioritized. We don't know. We yet have to analyze that.
Thank you, Swati. And we'll hear from G2 next. G2?
I'm having trouble with the mute button. Sorry. And so I echo what Courtney and Swati said. I think that we do have a little bit more leeway on the capital budget than we have on the operating budget, so that's a little bit less of a problem. I would say that we do have a master plan which we have been which we're commissioning and taking a relook at, and so there's a whole bunch of activity on that front. I would say that if we actually have like the must-have items on the capital improvement list, that's something that will have to go forward. Courtney gave a couple of examples. What we can defer, we'll wait to see what our situation is, and then we'll have to put that off. And so it's actually pretty much what anybody would do at this situation. Be cautious, spend on what you have to, and have a long-term plan. That's pretty much what we're going to be doing.
Thank you, G2. And lastly, we'll hear from Sarah on this question. Sarah?
Okay, thank you. So I think Courtney and Swati and G2 have all three really answered this nicely. So I'll just add, yes, I'm meeting with Stuart Henry, our Director of Business and Operations, tomorrow. One of the topics is a revised capital budget. I know that he's already working with our EFC and with Lena on the board. There are some things that are a safety issue that are a must do, as the board members have referenced. The pool, for example, if you've seen photos of what's happening underneath the pool, that has to happen as soon as possible. We also are going to have some projects that we weren't planning on. So for example, if you look at our elementary school, there aren't desks. So we are going to have to look at, they were mentioning, we're going to have to look at bringing desks in so that we can help with social distancing as a possibility. So, so there's some things like that where we're having to reassess and re-budget, but we are definitely looking at paring down that budget for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to all the candidates for their responses this evening. In the interest of time, we're going to conclude the event here. There were a few questions that we didn't get to, so apologies if we weren't able to answer your question. Please feel free to write your questions into the election committee or to the board members if you feel it's important that you hear a response. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening, and thank you for your time. Just a reminder that following this event, elections will be conducted online until noon IST on Thursday, May 21st. Remember, you will vote for 4 of the 6 candidates who are sitting here today to sit on the board for 2-year terms. Please check your email for voting instructions and your personalized voting link after this event is finished. Also, this event has been recorded and the link will be sent out soon. Please tell your friends and colleagues who couldn't make it today that they can watch the recording at their leisure. So I'd like to thank everyone for being a part of this first meet and greet webinar that was online. And I'd like to thank all the candidates for sharing their thoughts this evening with everyone in attendance. And I hope that everyone found the event informative and helpful, and that it will help you have some clarity when you go to the voting box tonight, or the voting link. So thank you, everyone. That concludes the event for tonight. And that's it.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
I noticed there's some chatting that there's one final question. Megan, are you still there? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Need to take that question.
I just mentioned to Megan that there is a question from students, and I think we should take that one.
I agree.
Okay.
Is that okay, Megan?
Oh, it's fine with me. Yeah. So the candidates would like to answer the question from student William Bay, high school 10th grader. It says, student representatives running for the executive council have commented that they would like more autonomy in how they operate. What is your view about this request from student leaders that they would like greater autonomy in how the executive council operates in relationship to the school? So for this question, we will go first to Courtney. And Courtney, you have 1 minute to answer the question.
Sure, I'll admit, because both of my children are in elementary school, I don't know a great deal about the executive council or its relationship to the, the high school administration. I will say that I deeply value the executive council representative on our board. I think that those reports every month are very valuable. They're very honest. And, we spend a great deal of time thinking about, what those reports say and, asking administrators to respond to them. So unfortunately, William, I don't have a great deal of visibility on, on the amount of autonomy you have versus, what you want. But I will say that the executive council is very valued from the board perspective, and it's certainly something that we can talk about if you want to submit that, to the board through your representative, through your honorary board member, if it's something that we should have visibility on. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Courtney, just in time. And Swati will answer the question next. Swati?
Thanks, Megan. Hey, William, thanks so much for the question. But more importantly, thank you for your thoughtfulness about your role on the EC. This is exactly the kind of feedback that's important for the board and the leadership team to hear. I also feel that the school is a safe, it's a great safe place for the students to learn a lot of these skills of how to manage within a budget, with having that empowerment to make those decisions within certain guidelines, how to keep, how to stay true to the charter of your EC, etc. So I think there's a lot of weight to what you're asking for. The details would obviously have to be figured out. So I think, but all I would say is it's a great one to bring up. And I think it's a great discussion and a dialogue to have between the student community and the leadership team. And of course, if the board needs to step in, we can do that too, but I have a feeling it'll get solved just within the leadership team and the student body.
Thank you, Swati. Jitu, to you next.
Sure. Thanks, William, for the question. It's really nice to have questions from a student, not just a parent or a teacher at a board meeting, at one of these meetings. I actually have spoken to EC members, and so I kind of have a little bit of a read on this situation. I think what we need to do is to help the EC better define what they mean by autonomy, because I think what we're really talking about is having more of a voice in the needs of high school. Now, my daughter's gone through elementary, middle, and high. This issue doesn't crop up in elementary and middle. The kids are at a very different stage of development. But in in high school, that's when personal independence starts to come in, and that's where a lot of the desire to have a lot more of a say in what goes on is present, and the EC is the conduit for that. We do hear from them, and I think that it is something that we do need to explore a lot more of to help better define what autonomy really means, because I don't believe that term is well defined as of yet in terms of what they can do. So it's definitely worth having that conversation.
Thank you, Jitu. Ritu, would you like to answer the question next?
Yes, I think a very interesting question, and I think my daughter is in kindergarten, but she has her own, she demands her own autonomy and her demands, right? And so I'm pretty sure, I mean, the council's ask is very fair. And I mean, in the corporate world, we do have something called a Millennial Council, right? Which we started, from last year, right? And where we actually go and seek, what the millennials are looking for, right? In terms of their ways of working, their ways of thinking, how they want the institutions to be run. And to be honest, I mean, the suggestions that have come from them is mind-blowing, right? And also what we did was, we had one millennial rep actually reporting to the board in every board meeting for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, right? Regarding what their asks are and how they, want to enhance that. And I think this is something I don't have the visibility of the entire process, but if this is something can be replicated, and I think it will be interest of, both the board and the council. Thanks.
Thank you, Ritu. And Sarah, we'll hear from you next.
Okay, hi, William. I love this question. I think this board has really tried to involve the Executive Council in a kind of a more meaningful way in this year. We've all, as Courtney said, really enjoyed having Otis as the faculty or the student rep at our board meetings. We also have included the EC and the CC on the hiring process for Andy Torres. And out of those meetings with the EC and CC, we added the leadership attribute for our new director that we value student voices. So that is something that's very important to this board. We want more of that. You played a big part in our strategic plan at the World Cafe. And what I would say to you is that you also have a fantastic principal who has shown, especially during this time of COVID, that he is willing to listen to the community. He will listen to you if you come to him with a good plan and help you achieve what you want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And lastly, Priya will speak on this question. Priya?
Thanks, Megan. Yes, I would like to answer. Though my daughter goes in elementary school, she's in grade 5. I'm also in the Penn Alumni Admissions Committee, and I do interview the candidates who are applying for undergraduate courses. So the point I'm bringing here is when I ask them a lot of questions, it's all about like talking about their leadership skill, talking about their collaboration approach, talking about the projects they are doing, and some of them like do outstanding job. So having this leadership skill plays a very important role for your growth. So I mean, as long as that autonomy is in terms of safety, I would like both to explore that. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. And thanks to everyone for making sure that we had time to answer the student question. Okay, so this now concludes the event. Thanks again to everyone for coming, and a reminder that you can vote starting now until Thursday, May 21st. And I believe the results will be announced at the board meeting on that date. So go out there and exercise your power to vote, and that's it. So that concludes the event, and feel free to sign off, and thanks again for coming.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.